who works with coaches in the international and domestic performance pathways, providing individualized support to develop their coaching practice and behaviors. Please join me in welcoming the incredibly talented Sarah Green.
Those things are just really embarrassing. For all of us. Thank you for being here. I know that it's been a busy, long weekend, but I really appreciate just the opportunity to kind of just come, like, chat a little bit about some coaching. So, and I guess the point is we've seen a lot of different sessions, and like every person so far has talked a little bit about coaching, and obviously Nick delivered a session yesterday on field. But I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of like your coaching craft and maybe some of the things that we can connect to kind of developing essentially what will become your coaching personality. Tracy has set me up really nicely for this session because a lot of the things that she mentioned, I'm going to kind of make reference to those as well, just in a slightly different way. Oh, this is now not working. Oh, it might come back there. Thank you. I think it's maybe important because there'll be an element of you trying to connect some value, let's be honest, to what I've got to say. So I think I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit about my journey as a coach. So prior to working at England Netball, and I can test your knowledge on netball later because I'm aware that that's not a very prominent sport in Canada. I used to work at the FA. I worked there for 11 years. Did a few different jobs, so was a skills coach working with 5 to 11-year-olds, FA coach educator, and then finished my life at the FA working in PE and coaching in education, so effectively training teachers in either university programs or within a school-based setting. I also currently am head of performance at Derby County Women, but prior to that was first team head coach before I got my job at Netball. I joined there prior to completing my A licence, actually, just because I really needed to kind of get into that rhythm. I've been working with 5 to 11s for a long, long time, loved it, like I'm really passionate about that, but I needed to kind of work in an environment in a more senior setting and potentially kind of explore what that looks like for me now in that coaching world, beyond just tying shoelaces every 5 minutes. But now I don't have the capacity to coach full-time really at the moment because of my job at Netball and the travel, but my role there now is a little bit of coaching, so I have the flexibility to, rather than being committed to 2 nights a week, I can just go along when I want. So I went on Tuesday actually, and I ran a meeting on Tuesday with the leadership group, so more around kind of developing some culture and values with the leaders and the future leaders of the team. And then watched a bit of coaching with some of the coaches there that are probably up-and-coming coaches through our club. My role at England Netball, so I'm not a netball coach at all. So in the UK, we've probably got a system now where we're probably seeing more coach developers sit within sports that are not from that sport. So England Rugby have about a 50-50 coaches who are rugby coaches and then coaches from other sports. England Hockey do the same. British Rowing have just employed a similar model. A lot of it, to be honest, is directly associated with like coach education. So it might be, I'm supporting you to do your UEFA C licence and I'll come in and help you with that, watch you, give you feedback. A little bit of that. Some of it is a little bit of mentoring, so I'll come and watch you, and then 6 weeks later I'll come back and we'll see how you're getting on. My job is, I'm basically everywhere the coaches go, I am there all the time. So I think it's quite a unique situation to be in there and supporting coaches, knowing that all the time, 100% of the time, they know absolutely more than me about their sport. And then just some other stuff, like I've done a bit of teaching at Loughborough University, like a big sports university at home. That, to be honest, I did that in the last year. It's one of the hardest things that I've done more recently. Working with like year 1 students, just think they know everything or they can't be bothered. Like, so that was a big challenge. I'm currently doing a master's in coach development, which is a huge personal challenge for me from a learning perspective, engaging in that again. But I'm really enjoying it. And then in the bottom corner, that picture where it says Spotlight. So I am a Spotlight practitioner. It's like a profiling tool, and I think that underpins a lot of the work that I do around working with people, working with coaches. It really explores their mindset and their behaviours, but it's different to kind of other profiling tools, I guess, in the sense that it focuses on flexibility. So by understanding myself, I can understand how I might behave in different settings. And when you're working with performance coaches, any coaches really, understanding how different environments put me under pressure and the flexibility that I need to move into those different spaces or work with different coaches is really important. And I think that is a really interesting way of looking at developing people, developing coaches. It's one and the same. Right, so we're going to kind of go through some of this stuff. So I'm going to talk to you about purpose, curriculum, something called desirable difficulties. Nick mentioned stuff in his keynote around change being hard, being messy, similar stuff. Explore behaviours, and that was set up nicely in the keynote for me as well. Someone posed a question, we're going to explore that. Something around reviewing and feedback, and then provocative competence, basically like working with a coach developer or another person, as Cody referenced in his session yesterday, around having someone next to you that maybe is giving you some ideas and thoughts about what is happening in your work. I was tidying my office and I came across these session plans, and I think it's a really nice place for me to start. And these are from Coach Ed. So I was delivering some sessions on UA4B and I found them. And I was like, God, they look really good. I hope that session was good. They look really good. And I started looking at all the bits that I'd highlighted. On FA Coach Ed, we're taught to maybe go through like what are the pictures that you want to create, who's your primary player, all that jazz. And then I reminded myself that at no point really had I thought about how I was going to do any of that. The experience that I wanted to create in that session, how I wanted to deliver that message, I didn't think about that. I thought about who was going to do it, what the centre-back was doing, what the full-back might do. I thought all about all that technical detail and never once thought about how I might go about my business when I was planning for that. And what was really intriguing to me is that these were probably about 2 years ago. How different that is for me now if I was planning a session. Like how much I would probably just draw a picture and there would be no writing. And I would just be going through a process of, I wonder what might happen today and how might I react to that, or I wonder what's happened before with the kids or the other coaches and how might I respond to that, and less about these lovely little X's and O's and primary players and the principles of play. So Tracy was talking a little bit there about purpose, and I wanted to kind of you to consider or think about or just kind of like reflect on purpose beyond like winning and losing. So what might be the philosophy about what you're doing, and do you know that? And like there'll be individual stuff. So I've spoken to a lot of coaches over the weekend and they'll say to me, like, my values are this and I'm really passionate about that. And that's really cool. And hopefully you're in a club which has the same kind of values and beliefs and they're aligned to that. What is your club's philosophy and what is all that about? And like, what are you driving forward for? That is just beyond, I guess, what the score is. Because if we don't know that, we'll only ever be like, did you win or did you lose? Like, how did you play today? How did you feel? As a coach, what was your performance like in that game today? Like, we'll only ever fixate on the score. So I think defining purpose for you as an individual, for you as a club, is important. And so one of the things I think is important to reflect on, I've crossed out used this, I copy and pasted that slide from another presentation, I'm not going to lie, and it was about high performing teams. But if we think about performance, and we usually say, and I've talked about this many a time, like the importance of working backwards from performance in terms of what's our end game. By only thinking about that though, we forget to meet the learner, to meet the athlete, to meet the soccer player where they're at sometimes, unless we consider, like I'm here, like what is that under 10, what is that under 15, boy, girl, whatever, elite player, recreational player, like what do they need, what are they showing up like already? And then as we plan for our season, as we plan for, I don't know, our 3 or 4 year cycle, however you guys work, I put on that post-it, what are your World Cups? So I work in a sport that's on a 4 year cycle where actually in year 1 and year 2 we don't have any major competition, which doesn't make any sense. And then in year 3 we play in a Commonwealth Games, and in year 4 we play a World Cup. So we can plan for 4 years with the red flag being our World Cup. But there's other stuff happening all the time, and if you're not in that World Cup squad and you're in our Future Roses programme, you might not have that. So what are those moments for you? Like, what are your Wimbledons? What are your World Cups? What are your Champions Leagues? Whatever you want to call it. Now, one of those lines might be the game every Saturday. One of those might be at the end of the season, Tracy and that video that she shared talked about what does success look like for you. That might be, I just want all the kids to have had a really good time, and I want to reflect back on playing time being really equal and all of my kids having an opportunity to develop in the number of positions that they want to play, whatever. But if you just keep going forward, waiting for things to happen, and we're not thinking backwards from those little events, we might miss some opportunities to change. Have people seen this before? Yeah. So when I was at the FA, we had a project like Lions Den type thing where we were all involved in kind of like giving some input. I think it was a significant time in our coach development in terms of making sure that we had some structure. Looking back at it now, I don't think it was the greatest thing ever to exist. But do I think it gave direction and clarity at a time where coaches didn't know what the England team was going after, and also maybe weren't putting together all the bits of what great coaching, good coaching could look like? Yeah, I do. There are some things when I reflect back on there now about the coaching fundamentals that I'm not sure like that was great, but it gave a sense of belonging and direction, and meant that coaches were all travelling in the same direction. And did it create almost like an infectiousness for coaches to want to learn more and be a part of the England journey? Yeah, like it really did, and it made coaches engage in that. At Netboard, we have something called the Roses Way. So it's similar in concept, right? I've not put the Roses Way up there because I thought some of you might take pictures, and that's not something that we're in a position to share. But what this bit is a definition of what we believe a rose is. So a roses player, which is an important part of then making sure that our curriculum, what we offer the players, is intertwined with that. Then our curriculum is driven by the 3 things at the bottom. So we want players who learn the game right, and that's really basic. We just want players who we give an opportunity to learn how to be better at netball. We want them to love the journey. So no matter what, throughout that whole time that they're in our pathway, they should never not be enjoying playing. It should never feel stressful. It should never feel like, God, I hate my coach, they're always shouting. It shouldn't feel like that. It should feel like a really good place to be. And then the last one is about win deep. Did we put deep on there on the end because maybe we didn't feel as confident to just say winning? Maybe. But also I think there's an element where we're trying to educate netball coaches at the moment that winning is not the sum of everything. So winning is still important, and never should we not talk about like we don't want to win. Of course we do, but there's more to that. So we got to the the final of the World Cup last summer for the first time in England netball's history. We'd never played in a World Cup final before. We didn't win, but we did still win. Like, there were some important elements of that. In the group stages, we beat Australia for the first time by more than 10 goals. We'd never ever done that before. That was really important mentally, tactically, technically, for our players to feel and do, and the coaches. Like, they'd never done that before. That was important. If we weren't preparing for all of those things, taking stock of those things, we could have missed those opportunities to recognise those winning moments. So that's what we mean by winning deep, and that underpins everything that we do. My job as a coach developer, so I've never been in any of those situations before. I've never ever been at a World Cup final in football, let alone netball, to be honest. But none of those coaches I've coached at a World Cup final before, ever. So I'm sat in a situation 6 months out, trying to prepare coaches for a situation that neither of us have been in, and we didn't actually know what was going to happen. That's so important to kind of like thinking ahead about all of our curriculum, all of our kind of interactions. Like, we can prepare pretty well for football. We don't actually know what's going to happen. Like our formations and tactics and stuff like that. But how much time have you spent preparing for football matches, thinking that the opposition are going to do this and they don't do that? They don't play their star player where you thought they were going to play them or whatever. Like, sometimes it's also about preparing for situations that we don't know what's going to happen. And that might just be kind of thinking and looking at diversity of sessions, looking at kind of like different interactions with coaches, but that's so important, like thinking about what's going to happen and what might happen. So when I was thinking about kind of developing the craft of those coaches, someone talked about, I can't remember who it was now, someone talked about learning being linear, and you know, we can look at, when I was coaching in Girls Centre of Excellence, we would have a curriculum that was very broad. For 6 weeks, we were going to work on passing. The next 6 weeks, we might work with running with the ball. Just madness like that. None of those things really happen in isolation, right? So blocking learning is okay to some extent, but then we might lose opportunities to connect with other aspects. So by having curriculums that spiral and mean that I'm going to work on defending here, like 1v1, or even better, I'm going to work for the next few weeks on moves to outwit an opponent. And we can outwit opponents either by dribbling, like staying on the ball, or passing, quick and clever movements. So by working on topics that are a little bit more expansive and a little bit more freedom, give me the opportunity to not work so linear, but to spiral back up and back down. How many of you have been in situations where you feel like you've worked on something for 6 weeks, but they still haven't got it? And you feel like you've got to go back over something, or, you know, like, that's okay to keep going back up and back down, because they have to make connections with other bits of knowledge to form performance. I think the bottom aspect of kind of developing knowledge, that quote around developing knowledge and then throwing some things out that don't work for me, is really important for the players and the coaches. Like Nick's session yesterday, I think there was definitely people in that room that would have looked at that and gone, that's nothing brand new, like I've seen a session like that before. Good. But what did you notice about the specific detail about what Nick did? So there's some bits that you'll look and you'll just throw that away and be like, that's not important to me now, or actually that's really struck a chord with me, I've really noticed that. And all of this, by the way, is beyond you just writing down the session details, which I saw some people do, and some people want to copy that session. It felt really good, right? But what was really important? What was one of the main things that people took away? Like, what felt good to you about Nick's delivery? Yeah, go ahead.
The kids were engaged.
Yeah, cool.
They wanted to be involved. They wanted to teach each other.
Yeah, that's such a good observation, because I don't know if Nick did a session plan or not. I'm probably going to guess not.
I would like to say, for a point of clarity, it was in my pocket.
Okay.
Yeah, it was absolutely done.
How very old school FA of you having it in your pockets?
Yeah. Why not?
But I'm also guessing that the comment and the observation that you just made, it wasn't on his session plan. He didn't plan for how he thought to interact with them.
Yeah.
But a really excellent observation. I like, what did that mean to you? What were you thinking that you would take away from that?
I thought that was cool that they would just let them be themselves, let them meet kids, and let them explore their own abilities.
Yeah, okay, cool. You had your hand up, sorry.
Yes, it's basically springboarding from what the lady said. His interaction, his interpersonal interaction with that age group, where he actually became them in many occasions, where he brought his level down, because his cognitive level is so advanced as a coach. If he brings that level, he might not interact properly or engage them properly. So he was always at their level and making them feel comfortable. He's becoming a child again, but a child coach.
Yeah, so, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that the kids were teaching each other without realizing they were teaching each other.
Yeah.
Right? Like they were, like the balance of movement, they were figuring it out on the fly. You could actually see them improve their balance and coordination even slightly throughout throughout the warm-up, for example.
And how much do you think that had to do with what Nick was doing, or do you think that was just happening?
I think it's 50-50. I think Nick showed them kind of initially what he wanted them to do or what he was looking for, and then because they're 8 years old, they probably went straight through one ear and out the other, and then they just figured it out themselves.
Yeah. So those observations are really good, and stuff that, like, Nick didn't know them, he wouldn't have been able to plan and prepare, like, had an outline of like what a session would look like. All the other stuff was Nick showing up and adapting to kind of like what was in front of him. One of the things that I think served Nick really, really well yesterday was the attention to detail around the children's name. And that is just so simple, because he got them to do the things that he wanted them to do so quickly, because he would have asked them their name. Now, he met them 10 minutes before, right? But still, he learned their names, okay? And he remembered those names, and that meant that when they were going off task a little bit, or when they were doing the repetition circuit and he needed to move quickly, he could get them doing it. But also that probably made them feel really good, right? Like, oh, he knows me. So, and he made that connection. So that made a huge difference to what he was doing. So what I'm saying is, football's football. Not many sessions will feel brand new to you. They're all the same. Someone's got the ball, someone hasn't got the ball. We're passing, we're dribbling, whatever. Like, it's the same. But the other bits that you can learn, and you can move some bits to one side, but the other bits that you guys have described to me are the bits that you can be curious about. Like, what does that mean for me? Can I do that? Like, would that show up the same for me? Like, how, if I was put in that situation yesterday, coaching some under-9s that I'd never met before, how would I show up in that scenario? I wonder what parts of my coaching personality I would default to. So I think when we're thinking about like planning for their learning, planning for this our learning, there's this element of like being in a pit, right? So we might think, let's think about the next season. We're going into the next season. I might plan out kind of what we're going to do ahead. And with the netball coaches, I will constantly ask them what's important now and what's important next. Is this relevant to them as we head into this next competition cycle? Do we need to do it now? Could we do it next week? Could we do it the next month? Like, how does that connect to where we're going? So we pick some stuff, and it might be, the next question I'll ask them, is this brand new? Like, have we ever done this before? Now, that could be the game specifically, or it could be the topic. So if we play against Australia, Australia play a very unique style of they just get on your body and they just play really next to you all the time. If we play New Zealand play off the body and confuse space. Now, there'll be some players that have never played against New Zealand before, and they don't know how to do it. So they'll be dealing with some troublesome knowledge of adjusting. Because when you play in a Netball World Cup, you play 8 games in 10 days. And they're all back-to-back nations. You will play Uganda, who are really long-limbed. There's no way you can get around that 3-foot mark. And then we'll play New Zealand the day after, who are about 6 foot away from you, sitting in a diamond shape, box midfield, basically, thinking you can play around them and you can't. So that's troublesome knowledge for a lot of players and a lot of coaches. We'll work on it, and then we'll fall into this pit of just difficultness, right? It's really hard, it's messy, our sessions won't look good, okay? I'm thinking about, I watched the UEFA B coach the other week. One of my top things that I think of in the coach's pit is a high press, right? When I go and watch coaches deliver a high press, a lot of the time, the UEFA B coaches they don't get it. Because they're working with under 12s, and they're trying to do a high press, but they don't know where they want to win the ball back, right? So we can press the life out of something, but actually, if we don't win it there, they're not sure that they're set up right to win it back in a deeper position. But they're still doing it. They've just got 1 or 2 lads just running out, trying to press the life out of that ball, and then the ball pings around them, and the goal, and they're like, I just think the kids don't get it. I don't think you get it. So it's kind of that high press. If I was picking something that stays in that pit, it would be something like a high press. It's hard. But in learning, when things come out of the pit, so if I think about playing against New Zealand, some of our younger players never experienced that style before. When it crosses out of the pit, that's learning, that's transformational, right? So there'll be stuff with you guys that you've learned that now is just a part of who you are as a coach. And you can't forget it. And the impact that it has on your coaching is huge. It's just an everyday part. You can't go back from it. So when you're thinking about learning for young people in your sessions, there has to be moments where you're reflecting and going, they're just not good at it. But it's okay because they're in that pit. But when they come out of it, they'll be really, really good. And that's just how learning happens. Often people talk about sessions being fun, enjoyable, we want to make sure that the kids are having a good time. I'm not saying that's not important. I just want to be clear. It is important that we're having fun and it is enjoyable, right? But Tracy mentioned in her keynote this morning that we're talking about anxiety on the extreme level. But by supporting young people to reduce anxiety and kind of feeling a hard challenge, we don't need to remove anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. So making players feel uncomfortable is really important. It's as important as having a good time. So something called desirable difficulties, right? So it's a theory around that learning. I think if I could just describe it to the coaches that I work with, all I say is it's not just making things harder, it's about the challenge, and it's about staying with the trouble. So it's not about making things nice and simple and well structured. We've talked about mess loads over the weekend. I was having breakfast with Nick this morning, talking about his session yesterday, and I said, we were chatting, and I said, the first minute of his session, I was sitting there feeling quite nervous for him. I thought, these kids are they're just not, this is not going well. Right? Now, in reality, it was a minute, it was 30 seconds, a minute, right? But I felt a lot of anxiety. I hope these kids stop messing about. It's like, this is not looking good.
You made a panic in my head at that time.
But I said to Nick, I'm pretty sure maybe things hadn't been presented to them in that way. I'm pretty sure maybe they didn't understand what you were saying. There's a lot of people that have looked at me a bit sideways these past few days going, what are you saying? And I think that's interesting around like how we stay with trouble when things are messy. So the little diagram at the side reflects back to what I said earlier. We could block learning. We could do running with the ball for 6 weeks. We could do passing for 6 weeks. Or we could spread things out a little bit more and kind of work on things a little bit more randomly. Nick said in his session, you could also use this for defending or for attack. It's the same thing, but just flipping the learning or retraining our focus onto different aspects of the same practice. That's a really good way of having desirable difficulties, making things challenging, and not always make the expectation that we should leave that session going, that was so good. Like if we leave a session going, I think they found that really hard. We could be curious about that and curious about our own involvement in that. Like, learning isn't easy. Soccer isn't easy. So it's okay to leave sessions and go, that was a nightmare. I don't know what was happening. And I wonder why. And like what impact does that have on what we're going to do next? Perfection isn't a part of learning. It just is not. No one's had a really good session. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure I've had many really good coaching sessions from start to finish. I remember passing my A licence and feeling like the best coach in the whole entire world. The next week, I went and did another session at Derby. We had a load of other coaches there. I don't think I would have passed myself on the level 2. I was so shit, it was unbelievable. But the week before, apparently, I was like an A licence coach. The next week, I was super great. So I was. It was almost. I bet if I was really honest about it, do I think there was an element of arrogance about like I've made it now? I probably didn't even think about my session. I probably just rolled up and thought it's fine. Now I've got my A licence. I probably did. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, you're just not gonna like be the same all the time. Like, you've got to put the work in. We also have to be curious about why things show up differently. One of the most common things that coaches talk to me about is, Sarah, I've been working on this on Tuesday, but when we get to the game on Saturday, like they can't do it. They're no good. So we've been working on 1v1 defending. We get to the game, they can't do it. Well, what's the surprising part about that for you is my first question. Like how long have you been working on that? What does it look like? But the netball coaches in particular, we've spent a lot of time talking about this. So they'll say, right, we've been doing some stuff on 3-court defence, which is basically just an element of defending from the front all the way back. And they'll say that they were really good in that session on Tuesday. We've gone and done some match play against England's Lawns. It was terrible. It was really, really bad. Like, I don't get it. We've watched the clips back. Such and such is not doing that and not doing. Okay. In that 25 minutes of that session, do you think that learning has happened? Yeah. No way. That's the first time we've done that session in 25 minutes. We're not getting it. We're not getting it enough to be able to perform. What we might see is we might see elements of them rehearsing it. We might see elements of them performing because we've removed all of the decision making from them. So they're just doing what we asked them to do. But what's not there is the cue of, if I'm now playing against my own teammate, but then I've got to go and play against Miranda, that's different. What she does is different. So I'm able to perform when I'm able to judge and make my own decisions and apply that in a different context. That's what we're looking for. So we need that adaptability from them, taking the things that Sarah's taught me, putting that into different contexts. Oh, okay, Miranda's not as fast as me, so I can do something different, and I recognise that cue. That's what we're looking for. I think the little table is something that we can be curious about in terms of how do we create space for learning to happen? What opportunities have we got for performance? So your games. And how do we rehearse performance and prepare for performance when we're not in those what feel like really important game situations? The game is the extension of our learning, not the end point, but it tells us stuff about where we might go next, right? So, this was in the chat yesterday in the keynote. So, if we think about who we are, our coaching behaviours, someone put, is there wiggle room for coaches' styles? So, if I say to you, like, coaching styles, what do you think of? Yeah.
Joystick coach, like
Okay.
kind of tells the players what to do, pass, shoot.
Yeah, so we might call that like a directive, big command, like we say PlayStation for kids. Someone call it that. Yep.
No, I was gonna say like authoritarian or command style.
Okay, cool. Anything else? Yes.
Guided discovery.
So what do we mean
You
by
ask them questions so that they can find the answer on their own.
Yeah.
So you're guiding them towards a solution, but you're not giving them the solution. You're asking them probing questions so that they find the solution.
Okay.
And then you get responses, and then you again ask them questions and try to find whether it is the best option or not. So basically, not making the decisions for them, but allowing them to create choose their own decisions.
Okay.
I was going to say guided discovery.
So they're probably the two common ones that people say because they feel like they're at extreme ends. Is one of those better than the other?
For learning, there are times it's situation based. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So what do you think?
We have one now, we talk about transformative coaching, right? And I guess there's room for both. There, especially in a game, there may be a moment where you have to be more command style if you're looking at a specific moment and getting a result out of it. But at other times, if you can get the players to figure out their own problems and solutions, finding the style that makes them recognize those moments, whatever that is probably the best way to reach that player.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
See, I come from a different view, because I do all abilities coaching, which is I deal with physically challenged athletes and also intellectually challenged athletes. But we have to do step by step sometimes. So sometimes the step is, okay, dribble the ball here and then pass. Where we have to tell them step by step. So we have to do this first, do that first, and then they connect each step. And then they put it together on the field during their game. So we have to do it that way, and then they connect it.
Yeah, so what we're describing, by the way, is I really love the way that you explain that, and you're giving a really good idea of like what it's like in your context.
Yeah.
My opinion, there's no right or wrong. What you're describing is a need, and what you described is there's a need, a situation. So we might have to shortcut something, and that context will drive us to that decision making, right? So direct instruction, I think feels better than command style. I think that's why people don't like it. But direct instruction is a really valid way of giving someone information, especially if they need it to be safe or they need it to be clear, or they've not done it before. So I need you to do this. What I'm looking for is you to do this, right? But there might be times where we need to have more wiggle room because we believe that they know how to adapt and change in that environment. And we could just signpost them to, so what we're doing today is we're kind of looking for us to apply pressure, like when the other team have got the ball. So let's just think about what we've been learning. I'm going to see how that shows up for us today. And we'll just see what happens. So there's loads of different ways that we can adapt and give information to people but also about the way that we show up, right? So if people talk about coach behaviours, they'll often talk about kind of like our communication, really. So hustle. Now, hustle in netball is such, well, it's basically that they've adopted their behaviour from the closest thing that I think to them is basketball coaches. So what they'll do, the game's on, and they'll be like, yeah, go, pass all the time. They just don't stop. But it's hustle behaviour. That was so good, yes. All the time. And I'm like, take a breath, like sit down. And we've talked a lot about kind of connecting in with who is that for? It's probably for you, it's not needed, like, and really listen to ourselves and what we're doing. We'll talk about hustle. We'll talk about kind of questioning or all of those kind of things. What I'm saying to you is, when, right back at the start, I said, when I planned for those sessions, I thought about the X's and the O's, and I thought about what the session was going to do. Didn't really think about how I was going to show up. If someone's going to go off this week and they've never seen Nick's session before, the risky business session, and they want to repeat that, might you show up as a little bit more direct and clear because you're nervous, you've never done it, they've never done it before? Yes, probably. Like, is that okay? Yeah, if you think that's what's needed. This is not a permission to be horrible and be nasty to young people. This is permission to, I need you to do this today, like, and what I'm looking for is this. Be clear and direct. Of course you can. There are times when that's needed. But there are also times when we can allow a little bit more space and a little bit more freedom for the players. My last little thing before I go on to kind of like the coach development part is, Pixar, they wrote a paper about their movies and kind of, it was about adopting creativity in the workplace, to be honest. And there were elements of that and what kind of like, what different things did they need to do in order to allow creativity and freedom. One of the things that they talked about was reviewing and feedback. And one of the things I find really interesting about working with coaches, this happens at Derby, and we played a game the other week and we lost. They lost 2-1, and then in the group WhatsApp, what I noticed, they played Sunday evening, our next session is Tuesday, so Tuesday, everything went out the window. We're going to have an analysis session, there's a staff meeting, and we need to be in a bit earlier, right? Because we need to, basically, they wanted to operate some kind of mad post-mortem. We lost, oh God, what's happened? Why did we lose? When we win, the same thing does not happen. So we don't deep dive performances when we do really well. Why not? Like, we don't explore what are the components of us. We don't do analysis sessions in the classroom with the players when we won 3-2 in the 90th minute. We don't explore why that happened. Like, why? That we could be just as curious about reviewing performance in equal measure when it's good, when it's not so good. I think that's important. And that includes our own performances. On the coaching bench at Derby, how did we feel in that game? We were chasing the game, we won that 3-2. What did we do to have impact? Cody mentioned 20 to 30% of outcomes are attributed to coaching decisions. That's intriguing, like I've not thought about that before. How will we behave? Do we think it was down to us? Were we quiet? Were we stressed? Did we have an impact on the game or not? Like, we could be curious about that. We can talk to our assistants and really chew the fat, deep dive about that. Not when we lose. When we lose, I never, at Derby, I really see the coaches talk about our impact on that loss, how they performed and contributed to that. Also, one of the things that I've been talking recently with some of the other tutors on my masters is that I think that what's missing from coach education, especially when you've got coaches who can't have coach developers or mentors all the time, is teaching coaches how to search for feedback within their own session. There is feedback all around your session, all the time. I think it's quite unique if I'm delivering a coach ed session though, because coaches aren't often that vulnerable, if I'm being honest, because they just want to pass. So, but if I ask a coach, like, how do you think the session went? And it was, let's just say it was a nightmare, and I can tell that they know it's a nightmare in their eyes. They'll say to me, I think the lads were really shit today. Like, I just don't think that they were very good. Like, they didn't pay attention. Like, they'll always go there first. They'll go to the kids first. So I say, oh, okay. What do you think about the practice? What do you think about you? You know, what did you notice? Like, sometimes I'm curious about how coaches can't notice that that area is just too small. You know, like, if you're working on playing out from the back, but you're not really playing out in a space that mimics the whole width of the pitch, what the back might look like, that's quite challenging. So, did you notice that? Or I watched a coach the other week. He was doing something on defending, and he was doing a practice that actually, in principle, the practice was fine if you were doing something like playing between the lines. And he had his back foot in, and I was like, oh, they're your back four. And he was like, yeah, they're all the lads that play in the back four. I was like, okay. He had 4 attackers behind them, right? Because he was doing like a through, so they would get the ball, they would turn around, and they would go the other way. It kind of makes sense for the flow of the session. But whenever that you played in the back four and you've got 4 attackers behind you, that's just not realistic. Like, how do you adjust your shape thinking about those attackers and then also worrying about 4 people that are actually offside? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But what had he done? He'd thought so hard about his topic from the perspective of, I think I just need to make sure that these defenders can move sideways. He'd not actually thought about what actually happens in a proper game. And he wasn't even playing in the full width of it. I think the area was like 30 yards. And he was fortunate enough to be on the end of an AstroTurf with the goal. And I was like, you know, on Saturday, these 4 lads are going to be defending this full width. And they're not going to be able to do that because we've just had them doing it in 30-yard area when actually they've got 4 people behind. This is not realistic. So you need to teach yourself to kind of see that feedback, hear that feedback, beyond just what the kids did. Like, what was my impact on that? Did I explain stuff properly? Did the session allow the topic to evolve? Last bit. Provocative competence around, well, like, basically, I think my job as a coach developer is to disrupt things. Disrupt thinking. Right? And I can be disruptive, but in a really positive way. This is not about being horrible or going, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? This is disrupting thought. So I think coach developers can accelerate learning, help co-create learning. In netball, I haven't got a clue, but can I sit down with coaches and think about topics and session plans? Yeah, absolutely. I understand invasion games, I know how they work, I understand their objectives. We can do that together. I think it's quite common that coaches can feel quite isolated and alone. Cody talked about kind of like how coaches feel. So working with other people helps us feel less alone when we're trying to work through problems. Does anyone here like jazz music? Yep. So I don't know anything about jazz music, to be honest. And I had to read this paper for my master's about jazz music. A guy had written this thing about lessons for leadership. And I was like, okay. So I did not know that jazz music, basically, when people get together, they just improvise. It's basically them improvising and like riffing off each other, I think it's called. So they don't follow a set tune or like the notes off a paper or whatever. Someone might just get up, play the saxophone, and then someone else joins in. I think we can be really curious about our learning as coaches from that, right? So we've talked about mess and learning being messy. I think there's something to be said about improvising things. So if we play games and we plan little bits of ideas, how much room are we leaving ourselves to kind of go, I've seen that now from that game, so where I might go next with my coaching practice is this. So leaving that flexibility. If Nick had have seen something in his session, like how prepared was he to go, I'm going to take my session in this direction rather than what's on my paper, because he's leaving room for him to kind of improvise and kind of take the session where it needs to go. The art of unlearning. I think when I was developing as a coach, I basically just copied off everyone I knew. Like, just did all of their sessions, copied their styles, did what everyone else was doing that was wearing the badge that I wanted to wear. I learned a lot about how not to coach, to be honest. And there was some stuff that maybe you've developed because you've watched a lot of other coaches in your environment. And maybe there's some stuff that you go, I don't actually think that's me. And maybe I need to stop doing that and I'd like to develop in this area. I think that's interesting, unlearning stuff. The others, experimenting, yeah, I think we can. Let your team play freely, balance structure, yeah, I think we've talked a lot about that over this weekend. Number 5, like taking turns letting others lead. I don't know if it's common practice for you guys to work in coaching teams or not, maybe on your own sometimes, maybe with others. Maybe there's a perceived hierarchy in the club, the head coach, the assistant coach. How much do we know what our individual strengths are? How much are we letting other people lead above the hierarchy? Letting the assistant take a session, learning from how the session builds from there. I think we can take turns, kind of mix things up. How many of you move up and down different age groups, coach the 12s, but maybe I'll go and coach the 10s today, or just observe and watch that and really understand kind of what's going on. I guess there's an element of just, it doesn't always have to be you. I don't know what's next, maybe that's it. Oh, that's it. I don't really know what time we're on, to be honest. Okay, so, well, listen, thanks for listening. I know that was a lot of information, and I'm happy and prepared for any questions that aren't too long. Yes?
I have a question. First of all, thank you for that. That was excellent. Just the idea of where there are inflection points. I think a lot of the basics that were covered in grassroots, like I think good coaching is good coaching, but where are the inflection points from grassroots to youth to pro?
So are you kind of saying that maybe in terms of the points of difference, like what's different if I'm an under-10s grassroots coach than when I go and work in a program?
Well, what gets added along the sort of coaching ladder?
Yeah.
Because I think that, you know, the elements that have been discussed around grassroots, you know, that sense of belonging, etc. Like I see that even in this morning's lecture where they talk touch points in the picture of LeBron James at the pro, you know, teams that have high connectivity have high success. Well, that gets built at the grassroots level. So it's obviously carried on throughout, but are there things that get added along the way to the coaching toolbox, if you like?
I wouldn't say that. If you think about toolboxes for like coaching, I would agree with you. There are lots of stuff that gets put in at the bottom, and that's how we build, right? And I think I know that you guys have got children's like courses, and we used to have youth award module 1s and stuff like that. I think sometimes what we confuse is that as we go up the path, like it's wildly different or much harder. Like I think coaching kids is a lot harder sometimes than coaching in performance sport because they're already good. They already can do it. What's harder up there is people management because people have got a lot more going on. So managing people, I think there's a lot more like high performing like decision making and being able to make decisions under pressure from a coach's perspective. And then maybe just some kind of like adaptability is one of the things maybe I talk to coaches a lot about what you're recognising that's happening in that game and how are you going to adapt to that to almost outwit your opponent tactically, probably. Joe.
My question is kind of like about like, you know, the staff or the coach that you putting together, you know, like say like if you know, you're getting appointed for a team in charge, and you know, throughout the season, I'm sure everyone experiences, you have fallouts with other coaches, you know, that are on your team and stuff like that. Is there like a particular process that you would recommend, or in terms of like, you know, maintaining those positive relationships with, you know, your co-workers or your, you know, your peers that you've got on your panels?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned Spotlight right at the beginning, but one of the things that we we're fortunate enough to do, and even at its most basic level, do I think that you guys can do it? Yeah, is we talk a lot about like what does good day, bad day look like for you, right? So we'll say, on a good day, what do I look like on a bad day? In high performing stressful situations, how does Joe show up? Like what do you look like? So we can understand ourselves better. And I think that helps with some common understanding, makes communication clearer. I can't tell you the amount of times that I turn up for sessions and I'll say to the head coach, have you told your assistant what you're doing today? And they're like, no. So they just know for the first time when they've turned up for the session. I can't believe that we're not even just WhatsApping people our idea of what the session's about, having regular coaches meetings and just checking in about our performance, our communication. I think we could operate effectively as a team better by not formalising feedback, but making it normal to say, I think that session felt like this for me today, what do you think? And really challenging each other a little bit, like I said. It doesn't have to be a post-mortem, but lots of little touch points that improve that. Yes?
Do you have a higher priority, I guess, on the importance of your own craft in how you prepare, communicate, get your message across from your own toolbox skill set versus the importance of, however it is, engages or connects with your player so that their light bulb goes on?
So, I was talking to Nick about this earlier. He did a couple of things yesterday that made me think, I don't know if I think that's going to get what he wants from that. And I was like, I don't know if I would have said that actually. But he said to me, do you know what? When he said, I want you to try and see if you can score in less than 3 passes, he said, I just thought of that on the spot, right? So thinking about things, and I think what you're describing to me is basically professional judgment, right? It's skillful coaching, professional judgment. So I can't tell you when I think that you'll get that. You'll just know that you've got it. So when I was teaching, they would always make us write down the questions that in my planning for teaching in primary school, they would say, what questions you're going to ask, and you have to write down the 3 or 4 questions that you were going to ask. No, I don't know. And the reason I didn't know is because I didn't yet know what was going to happen in that lesson. I didn't know how they were going to respond. I feel really confident now in my delivery because I feel like I've been in most situations before that when someone says something to me, I can respond and I can react. So I don't plan for any football sessions in that way that I showed you before. I don't do that. I might plan stuff out, like a drawing to remind me. But what I think about is me, like I'm feeling a bit shitty today and actually I'm so stressed, so I'm just going to have to say to my assistant, what I need you to do is this, and let me do the other stuff. And then I feel really in tuned and confident to deal with what the players are showing me because I've practiced a lot. And I think if you don't feel like that, it's okay to prepare and plan for questions, it's okay to prepare and plan for different constraints, and you recognise then that some work and some don't. But then as you become skillful and you notice that you can respond quickly, that feels intuitive, I think that's when you can kind of sit there and go, oh, that was really skillful from me today. What did I recognise that meant that that response was required? And that's just part of like your journey as a coach. Like when I passed my UAPC, I had my session plan in my sock, thinking that it was going to be really supportive to me to get it up. It's ridiculous, really. Like, that is not going to help me be better. What I needed to do was pay more attention to what was actually happening on the grass. But we forget to tell coaches that. We just teach them the practices. We don't teach them to read the feedback from what the young people are giving us. And that's where you'll get more kind of intuition about how to adapt and how to change your session.
Going back to your slide on desirable challenges.
Yeah.
I'm just learning into like periodization, and 1 week is a theme
let's say attacking transition in the fourth quarter, and then the next block you're doing a counter principle to continue that, but it's like every 2 weeks you're changing the topic of the themes. Compared to like what I've learned in the past, where it's like I've had coaches that just coach 6 months of just one session or just one focus and theme and try to get that through. I know in your session you said that like in the graph it showed like the different ways where it could be better. How does periodization challenge the player more and better for retention?
Yeah, so like that's not to say that periodization is bad. What we're doing now is like blocking out learning. We're thinking about how like the direction of travel that we're going. So that concept of like the different bits is called like interleaving, and it basically might mean that what we do is we could work on the same topic, but we might do it differently, right? So it might mean that now we've got less space, or basically we're doing the same thing but for a different practice, and that causes a disruption because I'm like, oh yeah, but we did that yesterday, and I was playing against Leeds and now I'm not. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't have to be like we're going to do turning this week and then we'll do passing next week. It doesn't have to be so different. But there's nothing bad about that. Like, what if you were working on the principles of attack, but then for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you flipped that and said, right, defense is on you now. So the attack don't think it's on them, but actually it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what you're doing is disrupting their thought process, but actually the practice is not really different. So there's still your periodization of this theme is about this, and I'm working towards that. We're just disrupting the thought process and flipping things about to refocus our attention. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was excellent. We do have a gift for you, so enjoy your spread. I gave you a food voucher. Lunch is now. If you need